change any part of this film at all whatsoever?
The characters, Candy and all the different characters,
Yes.
they're introduced at the beginning in a very interesting way, visually and stuff like that. But then when the story happened, I had a hard time trying to pick out who was who. Now, Candy was the blonde, right?
What's that?
Candy was the blonde?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Who was the girl
Candy is
with the curly
blonde,
hair?
Right, that blonde.
But she wasn't blonde. Hold it, wait.
Farrah's the platinum blonde.
Yes.
Candy is the curly brown hair with the eyes, the makeup.
That's Candy.
That's Candy.
Oh, okay. I thought that was Candy, but then they were talking about Candy and her look and her style, and then they were focusing on this woman walking down. So I got really confused when I said if I would have seen those character images at the end of the film, I would have been, because I could fall, I would have been able to make the association because I knew the characters were as they were gone by the time the story started. That's one change I would have made. I don't know if that's your big.
Really?
It confused me.
There are a lot of
It did
times.
to me
I don't think it's so bad to be confused. People act like being confused is like something somebody's done to you, like they've confused you. I was confused the whole way through last year in Marienbad. I didn't know what the heck was going on, but I still like it.
I mean, it didn't take away from the story, but I wanted to, I was juggling at one point, and was this person Candy or was that person Candy? It didn't ruin the film.
I was relying on you to remember Magoots.
You would have liked Magoots.
Yeah, it was very Magoo's-ish, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I did. That was a Tribeca horror. I wasn't hanging it.
Are we all Candy? Is that what
Well, the intention was also to try to tell a story with the way people tell stories, which is primarily recounting their own lives.
Tony was nowhere present in there, right?
It was only in B-roll.
Great. That much I got. I didn't get confused. It didn't one of those
Yeah, I really struggled with whether or not to cast a more prominent actor, but I only did one very brief shoot for that.
I'm also curious to ask one other question before I start with the cast themselves, which is, do you identify with any of the characters within, any of the actors, any of those personalities, any of those people in there? Do you identify yourself within them? Because I found myself in shades, various different shades and different characters. Does that make sense? Any of you find yourself in that movie?
I find myself in the whole kind of Tribeca of that period feeling, and so I identify with that whole feeling there. You had Tribeca, late 70s, what was going on in those bars, a whole life that kind of disappeared now.
It's one of the things I like so much about the movie is it touches upon these things and makes you think and remember things that you might have forgotten. And for me, that's very important. And a filmmaker that makes it a point to remind us of things more nostalgic, of a different time, of a different era, of a different place. It's very important to me, at least in my personal opinion. Anybody else? Did you identify?
I don't think analyzing this film. I don't think analyzing this film even without is useful. I think it takes away from the experience.
Really?
Yeah. It's like when you go to it's ultimately the experience. To me it was like a painting in motion. So if I go to a concert, any kind of concert, I'm not going to think about what am I supposed to get from this and who's doing what. I'm in the experience. I'm just in the experience. So it can be everybody can be part of one experience. And analyzing it, it's not kind of, to me, it's not kind of fun to analyze it, knowing which characters are who. So you watch it again and figure it out again. It doesn't seem to be the essence. It's like, it was a very sad story.
Yes.
Very sad.
Yes.
And I would go so far as to say tragic. And, to some extent, it's probably my generation going through this. And I felt like that was the most important thing, is the feeling that comes out. It's like if you listen to Rachmaninoff, you said, yes, you can criticize, aspects of it or not like aspects of it. That doesn't seem the most important thing.
I guess I should ask the filmmaker, do you like it when people analyze the film or kind of pick and choose certain elements or try to relate to it? Would you prefer that or this young lady's interpretation? Where do you stand?
For me, it was very much a straight telling of Phaedra. You know, I wanted to make Phaedra possible. So if you know that story, I always had this idea that it could be possible in this time and place in New York. If I could capture the emotion of that. And I saw the tail end of that world in the people I knew. And I thought if I drew in the right performance, I could recreate it. And that was the idea, was to bring a plausibility to it. Just put it in that moment where it felt like it could happen. Or this, you know, very fantastical Greek myth could actually happen. Because there's quite a bit of activity. This transference and these different romances, all of this soap opera kind of stuff. And yet I wanted it to feel like it could happen, you know, in this New York scene.
Because now it's time. Okay, so I have to ask. You have probably one of the most beautiful casts of all the movies on screen, and I kid you not, like beautiful people, and I'm not joking. That always stands out to me. Choice in casting as it relates to what the people look like and how they perform, etc. So I guess I was really intrigued to ask you when you approached each of these people to perform in the course of this movie. Tell me the top 2 qualities every one of them had to have, because I'm like, they're all gorgeous, and I'm not gonna lie. There's very pretty people in this film. Am I wrong?
With 2 of them.
There are some pretty people. Pretty people. Hello? I'm
Very
not
generous,
lying.
thank
Okay.
you.
No, but I'm being honest. And that stands out to me. I think that's part of the film that's actually quite. I mean, I'm very envious of the fact that you have some beautiful people that are putting together a beautiful story. Was that your intention on purpose, or was it just something about that?
The performers that, you know, who are the dialogue people were, for the most part, just performers I'd seen perform, and I pretty much just emailed or called and said, I'd like you to do this. And I think Jason just got a completely random email from me.
I didn't know him. I didn't know
I
anything.
just said, I want you to do this. And for the most part, they were people I had questions, and I wanted to draw out their reactions to certain kinds of events in their lives with super specific questions, and I then knew I could edit into my script with their natural answers. And I gave them each a few cast lines as well, scripted lines. And then there were a few people that the gods, you know, like Donnie. So the story of Phaedra is basically that Aphrodite gets jealous of Phaedra one morning. So Aphrodite is the candy character. And so to cast people who then inspire the jealousy of the gods, like Poe and Farah, had to have a very kind of otherworldly quality. But also I shot those characters, you know, it had to look like the past, but also the afterlife and a fantasy that each of us is having individually. So those people were shot very differently as well. But I like to look at people who really have a presence and feel compelling. So these guys were just got emails from me.
So I have to ask you two, obviously. On the flip side, because you're not the director and you're performing, what about this particular project kind of pushed you forward and said, yes, I want to be a part of this? And more importantly, are you pleased with how the project turned out in your own eyes?
Yeah, I'm very pleased. Yeah, it looks good. It was fun.
What made you want to work with John?
I had already done another movie with him.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, and I love his poetry, and I feel like this is a very poetic creation. So.
And your performance in particular stands out. That's not to take away from
No,
anything
no,
else.
she's
Make
great. I
no
love her in
mistake.
this.
Eyes on this. I mean, right? Eyes on this, big time. You stand out, and it's not just the way you look. It's the essence of you. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
I mean, am I wrong? She has an essence about her, and that's not to take away from another actor, but you know this yourself. when you're doing a film, there's just certain people, certain things, certain moments that stand out. And when someone has a particular essence about them, they stand out within the film, and that makes the film stand out more. Just so you know. And for you?
In the email you had sent me, you had name dropped Jessica Barr, who's the artistic director of a theater company that I work with. And I know that that means you've seen me really fucked up on stage. You've seen me go pretty far, so you know what you're getting. And that was enough for me to say yes. The description of what he kind of wanted to do, even though I didn't know it was about Phaedra, I didn't know what the final product was going to be. For some reason, there was just an implicit trust in, like, yeah, let's see what this will become. We had done one other project as well before.
That's right. And we shot your. Did we shoot your sections in your theater?
In the theater, which is no longer available to Blessing and Rest. Yeah.
And it did not look like a nightclub, so that might have been surprising.
It's great editing, actually. Really good editing. Yeah.
Now, this is a particularly big project, obviously. I mean, there's a lot that's going on. So I want to ask some technical questions. First of all, one of the things that I like about the film is, I call it in-your-face photography, or in this case, in-your-face photography. I love how you use your camera to capture someone's face. You get very, very intensely close in certain shots. How do you get away with that and do it so well? Because you're really good at it. Like, you really captured, again, the essence of somebody. You're really right in there, literally right in your face sort of scenario.
I love this. I love super close-ups. I love to see people up close with their grill gigantic in front of you. I think that's one of the wonderful things about seeing in front of this film. I think we shot with the best digital cameras at the time at that moment, and so it could be shown. It could be shown at 10 times this resolution. It's completely overkill, but that's how you can edit it. And we shot with a 150 millimeter close-up lens on one of the angles and 50 on the other. So it's actually there's a super zoom in on one of the two cameras. So there are two cameras on every shot. One is at the side, which is either there's a wide and a super close. And the super close is over here, and it's this very, very close lens. It's just a big zoom.
Well, and in addition to big, there is a number of different locations that, or seemingly, that you use. We haven't talked about locations. How many places did you go to from start to finish to complete the film? Because it looks like a plethora.
I think that I was just looking at the footage today because I was going through the drives, and there were 12 shoot days, and a lot of them were kind of guerrilla shoots. Some of which I did, and some of which the second director did. Where I pretty much knew what I wanted. We were sneaking around to a fair degree. But in the real location shots, we were on location for a day on each location.
I get you.
How did you decide on the,
I can't quite hear.
how did you decide on the use of the flashing, the word flashing? You talk about, the characters, the actors, but that really was not all the film. It was really the use of the music with the different scenes, with the flashing. This was motif was going throughout. And I really was curious how you got to make that kind of decision to do the film. Because it was really like this off.
Well, it had always been my intention to have it feel like a 92% finished project. So the way a film project would look in the last edit, let's say, there are things about it that's not accurate. If you were actually doing that in film in that period, the cuts would not be so sharp because you would leave space between each of them. So I was choosing the frame, but it was also a way to tie together the different looks. The style looks, but I like that awareness. I wanted it to feel like film, and I like that awareness that it's film. But of course, it's not film; it's digital. I feel like that's sort of the artifice of the project, and the suspension of disbelief is just continually pushing you to re-enter that time period. that was kind of the idea. So specifically it's used to move in and out of cuts sometimes. And other times I'm using it frame by frame when I wanted to really draw someone into a specific frame. So some of those bumps, they're not really naturalistic, because some of them, for example, if you're bumping in, right, if there's a jump cut in, you're seeing more of the eye, or you're seeing more of the mouth, you're seeing more of the parts that I want you to focus on. So it's not honest. Those effects weren't entirely honest. But yeah, I did use them liberally. I wasn't shy about it.
I don't think I asked you this question, but I wanted to ask you this when we saw you last time. Do you teach filmmaking?
Not
Because you
really,
should.
But I think in writing and
Really,
I
right?
think that writing and media will eventually be the same. Are we doomed for that to happen? The departments will collapse and
Because
I
you
don't
should.
know.
You have I mean, look at this. Look what you've created right here. This in and of itself is filmmaking to a different level. It's to a different degree. And not everybody is willing to go to that extent. Not everyone is willing to take that leap and be able to say, I'm going to use so many different things. You use many tools within the course of this film. Obviously, we want to talk about the flute. So the flute's predominant. The music is predominant.
it's a Baroque flute played by Emmy Ferguson, and C.P. Bach was one of Bach's sons. And he composed for flute, which was unusual. And those are flute solos played by one of the two Baroque flautists in New York City, in the country. There are two of them, and one of them studied with him.
Oh my gosh.
It
Now,
was
when-
amazing working with her. She knew that flute stuff so well that we went in and she just pretty much just recorded it. That was, she just did it. She already knew all of it. So.
And when you originally started shooting when, and you completed when, how long was the
I
process?
think I shot it pretty much all over one summer. There may have been a few pieces. I think I shot it pretty much over 12 days, and there were a few little B-roll pieces that I had to shoot here and there. The Pontiac was really hard to get. There were a few period items that were not so easy to get, and I think that Max Fish, there were a couple of outlier shoots that we had to do over later. Most of it was in that.
Now, in terms of you two actors, in terms of preparation, did you do your own prep? Was there a lot of prep for this? How did you get ready to do something?
This is a very personal project.
Yes.
Because we're not, well, I'll speak for myself, I'm not lying about anything. Everything that I'm saying, except for a few of the lines, that's my life, that's up there. And so, one of the things watching it the second time is that some of the people that I'm talking to, one in specific, has since died. And so the things that I'm saying, I'm like, oh, that sounds very different now, and if it had been recorded now, that's not the way it was spoken about that specific individual. And no one would know that because it's edited in such a way that you don't know what anyone's talking about.
Sure.
And I kind of love identifying that now, the second time seeing this, because like Greek myth, even though the story is the same, and it's an oral sort of tradition, I feel like, depending on the context with which you're watching it, the story will change even though it is the same story. And so I had a very different feeling watching this the second time as opposed to the first time, just with the things that have changed in my own life, even though that story is still the same.
Was that tough for you to be so real and so true
Oh,
to
yeah.
yourself on camera? 'Cause
Yeah.
I imagine it's frightening.
Yeah, some of the I wish I could find the sheet, but some of the questions and some of the things that I brought up that I wasn't even asked, I don't know why I volunteered it, and it sort of buzzed in the back of my head afterwards, like I've just said something that I've never verbally talked about before, and it's on film, and I can't take it back, and I don't know what's going to happen with it, and I trust who I'm giving this information to, so I'm excited to see what's going to happen. But once it's been said, it's now out there.
Yeah.
It's like opening Pandora's box. So yeah, there was definitely a visceral reaction after my time that I spent looking at this.
And were you like,
I understood that what he was doing was a kind of cut-up thing where you say have a bunch of sentences and then you cut them up and you make new sentences. So I trust John. So I knew that even though I was speaking about very personal situations outside of the lines that he gave me, because those are the two things. So you had a little script and then you had questions that you would answer from your own life. And it's funny watching it. This is my first time seeing it. I treated it like gossip. So I was really, and also the way they shot it was not very intimate. Like my friend Heather was in it. She's laying back and she's real sexy and raspy, and that's kind of one way that she can be. And everyone else is sort of mellow. And I'm like, because that was the vibe at the time, and he just kept it. So I get to be your whack job on film, but I had no idea what else was going to happen. I just went with it. And also, the lines that he gave me, just for fun, I was like, yeah, I studied them so much, I even know them in Spanish. And he's like, let's see it in Spanish. I'm like, okay. So I knew that it was going to be just some mishmash that I would not even recognize later. And it's just fun to see what happened with it.
Oh, look at that. I often ask myself if you were going to do a secondary project to piggyback on this one. It almost seemed natural to me that you would do that. Is it just me?
I did a piggyback on this one, which is Theo, the actor who you saw, who's heavier set, who talks about riding the bus. I had outtakes from 3 different films, and I just cut them together of Theo talking about rides. So that one is done.
So did you have to do a lot of editing for this one?
This film was about 2 years back. I mean, it's a huge amount of editing. It's a gigantic amount of editing. This film is a huge amount.
It looks like.
And a lot of audio editing too. Because the locations have no sound. So all the audio, all the location sound is made.
Yeah, like I look like I'm talking in a restaurant. I was in the same hotel room that the girls were in the bed. And they're like, well, what? And it was a small hotel room. So it's like, okay, we're going to put you up in the window. Which of course went completely white from the
I
light.
wanted that horrible American flag, which was up in the corner. I had to get that.
I didn't see the flag. And by the way, you told Heather and I don't know what you told everybody else, to dress 80s and to wear tons of makeup. Do you remember this?
Well, yeah, so their portions were set in 82, 83, and the earlier stuff was set around 79. And Laurie Parquette, who you also saw, was wearing the tank top. We're talking about, man having a perfect V. So hers was like an Andy Warhol location, and we got some actual unused Warhol archive audio and slipped it in there, so it sounded with our typewriter, and so it sounded like a studio location.
Movie magic.
So we did have fun with the audio too, which was much easier to do now than when we did it just two years ago.
I did notice that White Horse, the famous cocaine song, was playing behind me. I was appreciative of that. Like, yeah, I like that. That makes me happy.
So,
And Judy and my mother was singing in part of the Mudblood stuff too. We had her audio too, singing as well.
so now looking
From
back,
period, from
No, I just want to say the actors and actresses were very good. But something, this is not Braves of Rap. The people in that period, people in that group, okay, remember, that was a very sexy, good-looking lot. I mean, they were all dancing and everything at Mickey's or wherever they were. That was a very handsome and pretty lot. Do you remember those people?
That's
They were-
true. I
they
was
were very
thinking like
attractive
cast
bunch.
people who looked like they
There
could
were a
fit
lot
in.
of actors and actresses actually in the group, too. It wasn't just random, so they're,
I wanted them to feel like they could have been in that.
yeah.
I mean, Heather and I definitely lived through the 80s and all the craziness, so we just spoke about our lives.
Yeah.
It was like, he edited maybe some more salacious things out. Possibly.
Thank you.
Who knows what you have? Who knows what you have on the cutting room
Cutting room
floor?
floor.
So as actors, and I'll ask the director secondary, what was the biggest challenge in this project? I always like to ask actors that because just acting alone, I think is difficult. What was the hardest part of this project?
And memorizing the lines. They were simple lines, but I spent so much time in that room talking about my own experiences that
Sure.
saying these like very simple phrases was really difficult for me to do, which is not normally a problem for me. But on that specific day, that was very hard.
Okay. How about you?
Actually, it was more the improvising stuff where I wanted to make sure that I didn't and ah. So I wanted to speak in a way that felt very natural, but didn't have a lot of pauses and things. Also, because I edit film, enough to know, God, that would be a drag. So I had to kind of stop, like gather, and then go, I have it.
Now, director, obviously we're in there. So for you, what was the biggest challenge of this entire project for you?
The edit took a very long time. And when we first started editing, it was like, we shot with these fancy cameras and we had this footage. And I mean, you needed like a 4 terabyte drive per day. And then to edit the whole thing in one timeline, you have a 12 terabyte drive. Now that's not a big deal. But when we started doing that, we're like, oh my God. You know, and it was so, it got easier as time went on, but the computers were not ready for the photo footage. So the edit was
The computer stopped.
the computer just
Would
couldn't,
crash,
just
would
couldn't
crash.
deal. I mean, the biggest drives on computers are like 6 terabytes. You can't put 6 terabytes, 6 terabytes of your movie on it. So then you're working on an external drive. So your movie is going through a wire for you to edit it, which is bad. So the edit was just really challenging. I would say that was unexpectedly challenging because I wasn't accustomed to that kind of adhesion, that kind of viscosity in the editorial timeline. You know, working in HD or something like this.
Right. So because I'm all about shameless promotion at this festival, outside of this beautiful film, what do you three folks have going on in addition to this? Because we always want to talk about what else is going on in the realm.
I've been meditating. I don't have a project right now. Something
I love
great will
it.
happen in the future, but right now I'm sedentary and I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Are you looking for a role?
Yes.
Have friends looking?
I am looking, and when it comes in front of me, I will grab onto it with all of my might.
Solid.
and fly into it.
John, what's going on in your
I've got a bunch of junk going on.
I
have
know.
This, I have this project with Theo. That will be the next film project.
Nice.
Beautiful.
No, tell me she's not pretty. Are you looking at her? She got beat with the beauty stick. I mean that in a loving way. They'll tell you that. I say that all the time. Yes?
I'm writing.
Oh, so you're a writer as well. So you act and write both.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if you can just do one thing.
I don't think you
I
can
agree.
do one thing
No, I
anymore.
agree
Yeah.
completely. Yeah. You have to do a multitude of different things. Any questions? Any more questions from the audience? Before I say what